Our first reading this morning is from the Old Testament, and it's Psalm 138. I will praise you, O Lord, with all my heart. Before the gods, I will sing your praise. I will bow down towards your holy temple and will praise your name for your love and your faithfulness. For you have exalted above all things your name and your word. When I called you, you answered me. You made me bold and stout-hearted. May all the kings of the earth praise you, O Lord, when they hear the words of your mouth. May they sing of the ways of the Lord, for the glory of the Lord is great. Though the Lord is on high, he looks upon the lowly, but the proud he knows from afar. Though I walk in the midst of trouble, you preserve my life. You stretch out your hand against the anger of my foes. With your right hand you save me. The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. Your love, O Lord, endures forever. Do not abandon the works of your hands. The second one is from the New Testament. Once I find it. It's from Luke's Gospel, chapter 5, verses 1 to 11. And it's headed, The Calling of the First Disciples. One day as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, with the people crowding round him and listening to the words of God, he saw at the water's edge two boats, left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put on a little from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." When he had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled to the partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from here, Lord, I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken, and so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will catch men." So they pulled their boats up to the shore, left everything, and followed him. This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you, Neil. That's great. If you don't know me, my name's Paul Myers. I'm a member at West End Church in Hexham, and it's really good for us to join with you today. And you know, it's a real privilege, and I hope that we'll be able to, you know, worship God together and unite in that way. I'm not a local preacher. I'm a worship leader. So the disclaimer is that all the word I'm going to bring you today is things that I've got from various websites, from the Methodist website and so on, terms and conditions. But I hope that we can worship God today. So first of all, I'm going to start with a reflection on that reading, which is written from the perspective of Simon, one of the fishermen. How did I get to know Jesus? Believe you me, I tried quite hard not to get to know Jesus. I heard the stories that came over the hill from Nazareth, how he'd preached in the synagogue. That Sabbath, when they tried to lynch him for saying that God cares about Gentiles as well as the Jews. Too dangerous for me to handle, I said to myself. Best stay where I am. Not that I was exactly content in the fishing business. The Romans had a dried fish plant down the lake at Magdala, and the demand was ruining the fish stocks. And besides that, I was starting to wonder if there might be more to life than scaling fish and mending the nets. But Jesus, no thank you. But when he came to Capernaum, whose house did he end up in? Mine. He'd healed all these people in the synagogue, and then my fool wife came running up and asked him to come and sort out her mother, who was running a fever. So there he was, right in the bedroom. And the fever left her, just like that. Made me think. And then the next day, he was at the lakeside, teaching a huge crowd. I tried hard to be invisible. bent over the nets as I washed the fish scales out, but it was no good. "Simon," he called, already in my boat, "give me a ride." So I had no choice but to row out a little way and then drop anchor while he taught. He was speaking about God's generosity and grace. I sat there thinking that if God was really so generous, he might have given us a fish or two in the night before. When Jesus had finished, he turned to me and told me to row out a bit further and put the nets down. Well, I tried to be patient with him, though I knew there were no fish around there. I didn't want to be rude, not after the mother-in-law episode. "Okay, boss," I said, "if you say so." And then suddenly the nets were alive with fish, flapping and gasping, tearing the net, unbalancing the whole boat. I yelled for James and John to come and help. And then it hit me. Jesus had done this. He had found fish where there were none. He had fed my family, given me and the lads enough to sell, enough to keep us going all winter and beyond. After all my questioning and doubt, he'd done this for me. "Get away from me," I said. I could not cope with the wonder of his presence, his power over all my reluctance and sin. That was the word. "Get away from me, for I am a sinful man." And then I added, almost against my will, "Lord." I was on my knees in front of him, shuddering with awe and fear. And I can still remember the steady look in his eyes and his hands on my shoulders. "Don't be afraid." How many more times would I hear him say that? You will be catching people now. No longer the fisherman catching fish to die in the unfamiliar air, but someone who catches people up into the life they're really meant to have. And so I walked away from the boat and followed him. Simon is caught by surprise in the midst of his ordinary daily grind. And in fact, after a particularly lousy night at work, he's encountered by one who changes everything. Amazed by the power of God displayed in the abundant catch of fish, Simon is immediately aware of his sinfulness and unworthiness. He sees the overwhelming disparity between God's power manifest in Jesus and his own mortal, compromised life. Jesus responds to Simon by saying, "Do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching people." And the Greek word for catching used here, zogron, is rare in the New Testament, but it means to catch alive. Here, Jesus calls Simon and his partners to a new vocation of catching people so that they might live a life-giving vocation of being caught up in God's mission of salvation for all. And although they've just brought in the greatest catch of their fishing careers, Simon Peter, James and John leave those boatloads of fish behind and follow Jesus. Their encounter with Jesus has completely reorientated their lives. So reading various commentaries about this passage, it seems to me that the commentators focus on two aspects of it. One is the ordinariness of the people who are called the fishermen, and the other is the fear that they had of doing something different, of stepping away from their ordinary lives. And it made me think, what is ordinary? Who are ordinary people? And if you don't know me, I'm a dentist. And as dentists, we see all people. We see rich, poor people, landed gentry, people who catch rabbits for a living, even a gangster I had as a patient. They all need their teeth fixed. He kept having a front tooth that get knocked out all the time. And speaking to them and getting to know them over the years, you realize, of course, that they're people. Yeah, some of them are wealthier than others, and some of them have got higher social status and so on. But basically, everybody is the same. We're all just people, and this is a call for all of us. Jesus comes along, enters our utterly normal, mundane lives and just changes everything. Jesus calls Simon and his partners as they are. And throughout Scripture, we see that human sin and failure and inadequacy are no obstacles to God's call. God calls imperfect people to do God's work. People who are aware of their unworthiness and are often doubting and resistant to God's call. God doesn't wait for them to shape up. God calls them as they are and then works on shaping them into faithful servants. The BBC were reporting this week that the cost of living is set to rise. I'm sure you've heard that, good news. And they were talking about the cost of living going up by 5.4%. And it's mostly because of the rising cost of fuel and food. And Jack Munro, who is a writer about food and a campaigner against poverty, and if any of you are on Twitter, you may have come across this. Jack Munro responded to this to explain that the cost of food has increased massively for those who rely on the cheapest foods. So, for example, if you buy the cheapest pasta in a supermarket, that's gone up from 29 pence to 70 pence for the same amount of pasta in the last year. And that's an increase of 141%. Rice has gone up from 40 pence a kilogram to £1 for 500 grams. That's a rise of 344%. Baked beans have gone up 45%. Peanut butter, 142%. Mushrooms, 56%, and so on. And in the meantime, the luxury foods, you know, the ready-made foods that you can just stick in the microwave, a luxury ready meal that cost £7.50 10 years ago is still £7.50. And if that had gone up the same rate as rice has in the last year, that would cost £25.80. And it just made me aware again of how comfortable my life is. And Jesus clearly had a heart and a message for the poor. But people who are desperate, people who are in that position where their food is going up massively, they're the people that are also desperate for change. And people who have comfortable lives with enough food to eat and enough money to do what they want, they're not keen for change. Why would they be? And hence the expression stepping out of our comfort zone. It's scary. But as we heard in the psalm earlier, though the Lord is exalted, he looks kindly on the lowly. Though loftily, he sees them from afar. Though I walk in the midst of trouble, you preserve my life. You stretch out your hand against the anger of my foes. With your right hand you save me. The Lord will vindicate me. Your love, Lord, endures forever. Do not abandon the works of your hand. How often do we resist Jesus' claim on our lives because what he is calling us to do seems too crazy and too impractical? How often do we avoid putting out into the deep waters of following and bearing witness to Jesus because we're convinced that we will not see any results? What might it mean for us to go deep sea fishing with Jesus, to trust and follow him outside our comfort zones, to let go of certainties, to have our lives radically reorientated? For most of us, this will not mean leaving our current professions behind, although we can't rule that possibility out. But we're all called to participate in God's mission to the world in Jesus Christ. We're all called daily to align with God's priorities, to use the gifts that God has given us in service to others, to share the good news in Christ, of Christ in word and deed. Jesus' mission does not wait until we think we're ready. The need for the gospel in this broken world is far too urgent. We are called right now, even in spite of our frailty, failures and doubts, even in the midst of our ordinary, busy, complicated lives. Jesus' word to Simon Peter is also a word to us. Do not be afraid. This is Jesus' mission, and we trust that he will keep working with us and through us, catching others as he has caught us in the deep, wide net of God's mercy and love. We trust, finally, that the catch is in God's hands and that God's desire is for the net to be bursting and the boats full.